Hello there. Boris bounces back into number 10 and changes nothing. And someone is suing the government over the legality of this lockdown. Firstly, please give this video a like to give my channel a boost, and I'm always uploading new videos, so please do check back daily. Now that the Prime Minister Boris Johnson has recovered from his encounter with the invisible enemy, it had been bandied about that he might bounce back into number 10 and start setting out plans and timescales for lifting this cumbersome lockdown, maybe even as soon as this week. But in a speech outside number 10 this morning, he showed he is steadfast in his determination to follow the science and not move until the risk of a sudden second wave that could overwhelm the NHS has been reduced as far as possible. But this is in the face of a recent disquiet over the severity of the lockdown and the huge adverse effect it is having on the UK economy. People are visibly tiring of the lockdown, and with reports of empty wards and the reduced number of cases and fatalities, there is a growing mood to get this lockdown lifted and get life back to normality, or as near normality as we can. With the Mail reporting today that Britain's roads were packed with traffic this morning as phone data showed that millions more people are taking to the roads in a further sign that they are starting to get back to work. And the report also said, photographs taken during rush hour showed queues building up on London roads, including the A40 at Perivale and the A102 at Greenwich, while the M5 in Bristol and the M6 in Walsall were also busy with cars, vans and lorries. Meanwhile, rail commuters continue to pile onto London Underground trains as travel bosses carry on running a reduced service only for key workers, with Canning Town and Canada Water stations both busy this morning. But Boris isn't for turning, yet. In his speech this morning, the Prime Minister said that he'd been away from his desk far longer than he'd wanted to be, and he thanked everyone for their efforts in ensuring that the NHS was not overwhelmed. But he said that the signs of progress against the invisible enemy showed this was the moment of opportunity to press home the advantage, and not to ease up now and risk a second spike of cases and deaths. Because that would risk economic disaster, he said. And he went on to say that he refused to throw away all the effort and sacrifice of the British people and what had been so far achieved. And he asked us to contain our impatience as we have so nearly succeeded. We defied so many predictions, he said. We did not run out of ventilators or ICU beds. We did not allow our NHS to collapse, and on the contrary, we have so far collectively shielded our NHS so that our incredible doctors and nurses and healthcare staff have been able to shield all of us from an outbreak that would have been far worse, and we have collectively flattened the peak. But then looking ahead, he reiterated that the 5 tests of deaths falling, NHS protected, rate of infection down, really sorting out the challenges of testing and PPE and avoiding a second peak, all have to be met before we move forward. And on this he placed no timescale, but said that one by one we will be firing up the engines of this vast UK economy, and that in that process difficult judgments will be made, and we simply cannot spell out now how fast or slow or even when these changes will be made, though clearly the government will be saying much more about this in the coming days. And then he talked about building a consensus on how we did that across political divides and across business and across the UK. I think that's no less than what the British people would expect, he said. A good way of dragging everyone, including the opposition parties, into the frame. And he finished by saying that if we all show the same optimism and energy as Captain Tom Moore, who turns 100 this week, and show the same unity of spirit that has carried us this far, he said, I have absolutely no doubt that we will beat it, Together we will come through this all the faster, and the United Kingdom will emerge stronger than ever before. But there are detractors of this approach. Toby Young, for example, tweeted, "Disappointing speech from Boris. UK now an extreme outlier in not having announced an exit strategy. Evidence NHS would be overwhelmed if some social distancing measures were relaxed is negligible. Evidence lockdown is harmful to public health and the economy is overwhelming." But looking at the comments underneath that tweet, you can see how divided people are on this. And it hinges on the balance between the ongoing risk from the invisible enemy and the fast emerging risks from the lockdown. i.e., is the cure becoming worse than the disease itself? But any immediate assessment would be ignoring the dangers of a second wave hitting us, and trying to re-lock down after that would probably be a total nightmare. As I think was pointed out right at the start of this by the government, we could realistically only do this once, so we have to get it right first time. Now, I mentioned in a video a few days ago called "Are UK Lockdown Restrictions Easing?" about a constitutional lawyer, Francis Hoare, who argues that the lockdown itself is potentially illegal. And there have also been rumblings from other quarters about crowdfunding for such a case. Well, someone has decided to step forward and test the lockdown rules in court. And that person is Robin Tilbrook, the lawyer and leader of the English Democrats, who took the Theresa May government to court, if you remember, trying to prove that the UK legally exited the EU on the 29th of March 2019, despite the extensions put in place. Tilbrook is now submitting a case for judicial review, arguing that the statutory instrument used to put the lockdown rules in place are not legal and that they are disproportionate interference with English rights and freedoms. Tilbrook says that the lockdown is causing huge damage to our country's economy and to the traditional rights and freedoms of England. And in the court submission, which he commenced on the 23rd of April, he says that these regulations are contrary to the fundamental constitution of England as set out in the Magna Carta and the English Parliamentary Constitutional Convention Declaration of Rights of 1689 and its subsequent enactment in the English Bill of Rights 1689, as well as contrary to the common law of England in that non-exhaustively they are ultra vires, disproportionate and irrational, and also that they are contrary to the European Convention of Human Rights, pursuant to the Human Rights Act. And he then goes on to point out that the government guidance that says we should stay at home, only go outside for food, health reasons or work, but only if you cannot work from home, if you go out, stay 2 meters or 6 feet away from other people at all times, wash your hands as soon as you get home, do not meet others, even friends or family. You can spread the virus even if you don't have symptoms. And Tilbrook says these are not proper and do not accurately reflect the regulations. He also submits that the 2020 Act brought in to cover this is unconstitutional, contrary to common law and contrary to the Convention of Human Rights, because there was no derogation. In his submission papers, Tilbrook says, the regulations have grave impact upon a number of rights and freedoms, including at least to family and private life, Article 8, religious practice, Article 9, association and assembly, Article 11, property, Article 1 of Protocol 1, and education, Article 2 of Protocol 1, and probably to liberty, Article 5. They represent an unprecedented intrusion into the freedoms and livelihoods of the public at large, and the gravity of this impact is a key consideration in determining whether they are the least restrictive means of tackling, proportionately, the spread of the virus. He also says that the government's 5 tests that I outlined earlier on are wholly incompatible with the Syracuse principles that have been developed and recognised by international law to determine the proportionality of quarantines and measures responding to public health crises. Now, many people might call this interfering, getting in the way of Boris, or even downright dangerous. But when governments are taking drastic actions of any sort, their legality should be challenged, if there is any doubt at all, especially when the health and economy of the nation are at stake, and especially when the laws and regulations have been rushed through with virtually no scrutiny at all, and Parliament is either shut down or working under extremely onerous conditions such as at present. And further, when laws were already in place to deal with this sort of event in the form of the Civil Contingencies Act, which could have allowed for more parliamentary scrutiny. Then there's the matter of the timescales for judicial review cases. They are extremely tight and exacting. You can't bring a case outside of those limits. And if a court case can be brought against a government stopping it building a runway for overstepping green policies, or within days in courts across the land to try and prevent Brexit, then surely these government regulations should also be given legal scrutiny. It has to be challenged and tested now. Unless you totally trust the government in all things, of course. Anyway, if you want to hear more from me, please don't forget to subscribe and also press that little bell, or you won't get any notifications. And if you want to see more of me, buy a mug with my mug on it. So, what do you think about all of this? Please share and comment, and thank you for watching.